Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. In this episode, we will be interviewing Sophia Pavia. She is a registered dietitian nutritionist who specializes in women's fertility. Her greatest area of expertise is helping women tailor their nutrition and lifestyles to support healthy progesterone production, strengthening their luteal phases, and increasing their chances of a healthy implantation and pregnancy. She co-hosts the podcast Food, Freedom, and Fertility and is also a fellow military spouse. She is here to share some ways to learn how to track your menstrual cycle to support your conception journey.
Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And this is Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable. Pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experiences as mothers navigating the stage of lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you've chosen us to support you. Welcome to the MamasteFit podcast. We are really excited to have Sophia here to talk all about our menstrual cycle and understanding it to better prepare for our conception journey. Thanks for being here, Sophia.
I'm pumped to be here, Gina.
Can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, listeners. My name is Sophia. I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. I specialize in women's hormonal health while trying to conceive. My specific specialty, though, is in progesterone. So I help mamas make good progesterone by optimizing ovulation, by getting their ovaries as healthy as possible. That way that they can have an easier time trying to conceive and then have a healthier pregnancy once they do get pregnant. So that professionally, that is me.
So can you explain the menstrual cycle?
Of course.
and the different phases, things we should look for?
Yeah.
When I was in high school, my sex ed class was essentially you ovulate at some point, you can get pregnant anytime, never have sex. So I'm excited to hear the actual thing.
You know what? That was so many of us. We have not enough education when it comes to this. And really, I think part of the issue is that the education we do receive makes your period the whole thing. To the point where if someone even says, I'm on my cycle, basically they're saying, I'm on my period. A cycle, it's a circle. It's not completing. It's continuing to go. And so being on your cycle, girl, you're always on your cycle. Just what phase of it are you in? We've been sort of trained to see menstruation or your period as the event of your cycle, when in reality, ovulation is the event of your cycle. That is where your body releases an egg and you have a chance of becoming pregnant. And just like every other organism out there, from a single cell organism to the biggest mammals to human beings, reproduction is kind of the goal. Everything out there is working towards perpetuating its genetics into the next generation. And that biologically, I mean, whether or not that's your personal goal, biologically, that's what your body is up to every cycle. It is working towards that big event of ovulation. So switching the script from it's all about your period, ovulation is really the biggest deal. So what does that mean for you? And really, what even is ovulation, right? So a lot of times when we talk about the cycle, the easiest place to begin is in fact with the period. And the way that medicine views the menstrual cycle, day one of a fresh cycle is your first day of bleeding. A big reason why we do this is it's sort of hard to miss. Like, you're going to notice that your underwear is soaked with blood. You're going to notice a big stain in your chair, your pants, your bedding. You can't miss the fact that you're bleeding from between your legs. So that is sort of where we mark day one. And it really is, think of it as like the refreshing time where your body is going out with the old and in with the new. That is what your period marks. So I think it's pretty good that we mark that as like day one of your cycle. And from there, you bleed, which is your body shedding your old endometrial lining. And from there, your body starts immediately preparing for the next ovulation. We see estrogen begin to rise almost immediately once your period starts. We see an increase in a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and we see a rise in luteinizing hormone as well. Follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, they both come actually not from the ovary, but from your pituitary gland inside your brain. And they communicate with your ovary and say, hey girl, let's get ready for a baby. Unleashes this cascade of hormonal events where your ovaries change, your breasts change, your brain changes, and everything gears up for your next chance at pregnancy. And it continues to rise. All of these hormones continue to rise with a big surge of estrogen and luteinizing hormone coming right before ovulation. So that big surge is what makes your ovary able to pop off an egg, which is, ta-da, the big moment of your cycle. She's here, the egg. This is what everyone's been waiting for. She's like the Beyonce, okay? Like everybody is more like Taylor Swift. Ticketmaster shuts down for this egg, all right? This is the big exciting moment for your body. The egg is released. And that's where my expertise comes in, okay? Because once the egg has been released, the place on your ovary where the egg used to live becomes a brand new organ called the corpus luteum, which is Latin for yellow body, because that spot on your ovary literally becomes yellow and it begins to secrete progesterone. Progesterone, if you break down the word progestation, it means pro-pregnancy. It's getting your body ready for that pregnancy because, sister, whether or not you want to have a baby this cycle, that is what your body is trying to do, trying to reproduce and send your genetics on to the next generation, just like every other creature that walks the planet. So the egg gets released. Corpus luteum starts making all that progesterone, and that's where your body starts sort of putting up decorations for the new baby. The estrogen that was surging to get you ready for ovulation, it's simultaneously been thickening your endometrial lining. So that's the innermost layer of your uterus where the baby would implant and live if that egg was to get fertilized. So that layer gets nice and hardy and thick. Then all of this progesterone comes in, and that's what sort of fluffs up your endometrial lining. Kind of like, you know, when your dog is like walking around in its bed and goes like around and around and around and like digs and shoves, but patting and digs some more. Imagine progesterone doing that, fluffing up the bed just right so that that egg, that when it's fertilized, that baby can implant in the right place and begin to grow as a pregnancy begins. So progesterone's fluffing up what estrogen did. So estrogen sort of like lays the foundation, and then progesterone comes in and puts up all the decorations, and everything is in a waiting stage. All this progesterone, all this estrogen sort of bubbling along. Progesterone just keeps surging and surging and surging, hoping that a baby will implant in your uterine wall, begin to release human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG, which is the pregnancy hormone that tells your brain and your body, hey, a baby's here, and a pregnancy begins. But if that does not happen, a baby is not implanted, there's no placental tissue beginning to grow, HCG doesn't rise, that little corpus luteum on your ovary starts running out of steam. It starts to shrink away, the progesterone production drops down, and your body takes down all those decorations, also known as your period. That's all those decorations from your uterus coming on out so that you can start the cycle again. So that is a very basic, that's probably how I would explain it to like a 12-year-old who's getting her first period. That is basically what your body's doing. Maybe to 12-year-old, I wouldn't say human chorionic gonadotropin, but something similar to that is what I would say.
I'm imagining like your hormones like really excited to decorating for a baby, and then no baby shows up and they're just like violently tearing everything down in anger.
I know. They got to tear down the party. Yeah. It's not inaccurate. And for a lot of us, that maybe is how it feels, is that these decorations are getting torn down.
Of our cycle, the period is like a big indicator. This is where you are
Yeah.
in your cycle phase. What are some signs of like ovulation and some signs of like the other phases so that someone can know kind of where they're at within their cycle?
Oh, absolutely. So the two most observable parts of your cycle are ovulation and your period. Your period is number one because I don't care who you are, you know when you're on your period, okay? You would need to be straight up comatose to not know when you're on your period. Everybody knows when their period is happening. Blood's coming out of you. It's impossible to miss. Ovulation, though, she's not so loud. She's a little more subtle. So the signs of ovulation really line up with what you would think your body's trying to do, right? Your body's trying to get pregnant. And so as ovulation approaches, you have three major signs. The first of which being cervical fluid. Your vagina becomes much more wet with much more mucus, much more lubrication. You'll notice this not only in your panties when you take down your pants, but you're going to notice it especially when you wipe after a bowel movement. Because when you poop, your pelvic floor muscles are contracting and sort of moving things outward. And because they're right next to your vagina, because your rectum is right next to your vagina, what's inside your vagina will start to come out as well. You might have noticed this if you ever like took a poop with a tampon in. Like when you get up, you're kind of like, this tampon feels like it's like sort of coming out now. And it's because those muscles were kind of pushing everything out. This will happen with cervical mucus. So your most opportune time to check what your mucus is doing is right after you poo. You're going to wipe front to back. And first notice, do I feel sort of a slippery feeling? As the paper moves across my perineum, does it feel sort of slick, sort of slippery? And then look at the paper. If it's got like a snotty, goopy blob on it, hooray, that's fertile cervical mucus. And that's a sign that ovulation is soon to come. Our bodies do this for two reasons. One, our vaginas are kind of inhospitable. They are naturally acidic and antimicrobial because it's just sort of like an opening to the outside world. You could get germs very easily inside of your body in your most delicate places unless you have a defense mechanism, an immune system, and your vagina has that. It is naturally very acidic and very inhospitable for microbes. But when you're about to ovulate, all that fertile mucus, it raises the pH of your vagina. So it makes it to where microbes could live. Not so good if we're talking about vaginal infections. Great for sperm survival. Second, all of that lubrication makes it much easier to get a penis inside. And that's your body's goal. Wants that penis to get on in there so that you can get sperm to the egg and you can get pregnant. So that is part of why we see that fertile mucus right before ovulation. So the first thing that you're going to observe for ovulation is that cervical mucus. Sign number 2 is going to be your cervical position. So your cervix is the barrier between your uterus and your vagina. It's not just this one long tube that goes like all the way up into your baby maker. You have a sentry. You have this thick, how to describe it? It's like a thick ceiling, I guess, to your vagina. It does have an opening, but when you're not ovulating, that opening is tightly shut and your cervix is lower down in your vagina, kind of saying the baby shop is closed. Don't put anything in here. But when you're ovulating, your cervix will lift up inside your vagina, making your vagina longer. It softens and opens, basically saying, put a penis here, please. It makes your vagina longer so that penis can get higher up inside of you, and then the cervix opens up so that sperm can get deep inside and make that baby. So you can check that by touching your cervix, and I have a whole online class where I teach you how to do that if that sounds scary to you. So your cervical position, your cervical mucus, and then the last sign of ovulation actually comes after ovulation, and that is a rise in your basal body temperature. That hormone progesterone that we were talking about, it doesn't just communicate with your uterus. You have progesterone receptors in almost every organ system in your body. Your brain, your breasts, your heart, your intestines, they all respond to progesterone. So when that corpus luteum begins to secrete progesterone after ovulation, it is going to raise your basal metabolic rate. Your body's entire metabolism changes in preparation for pregnancy. And the easiest way to detect that is by taking your basal body temperature every morning, and you will see a marked increase after ovulation because your metabolic rate has increased. Your body temperature will increase. So those three signs combined, like Captain Planet, with our powers combined, you can know that you're ovulating. So the period is sort of like loud and proud, red flag flapping in the wind, and ovulation is a little more like, if you want to know me, you got to work for it. Like she's a little more coy. She's a little more aloof. Whereas your period is like, I'm here. What you going to do about it? Cry? Probably.
Yeah. Let's take a break from this week's episode to chat on how Needed can optimize your fertility. My husband and I are planning for one more baby, and we have a few months before we are trying to conceive, but I am 35 and it takes 3 months for an egg to mature for ovulation. So it's important to focus on my egg health now. Needed's egg support plan includes their egg support supplement and CoQ10 supplement. The ingredients were hand-selected by a team of fertility practitioners and researchers, and all of these antioxidants have clinical evidence for supporting egg quality and related fertility outcomes. So while my husband and I are not actively trying to conceive right now, we are prepping for our conception journey since I am 35. And so I'm choosing to use Needed's egg support plan, and you can too with code MamastePod for 20% off your first order or 3 months of subscription. What are some ways to measure your basal body temperature? Because I've tried a thermometer and that thing is like knocked off my end table. I can never find it. And then I mess up my basal body temperature.
Oh my God. I had the same problems. Imagine, I had the same problems and I do this for a living. So listen, the cheapest way is to buy a basal body thermometer, which is a thermometer that has 2 digits beyond the decimal point, and to take your temperature at the exact same time every morning immediately upon waking. It's a little more nuance to that, and I teach that in my Ovulation Unlock course, but that's the meat and potatoes of it, all right? And so if you only have $12 to kick at this problem, there you go. Go get yourself a cheapo thermometer and just take your temperature every morning. This is what women have done since the beginning of thermometer invention, all right? That's the way that I would say most women do it. But if you're like me and that just doesn't work for you, you have tried, you have set alarms and reminders, you've done all the things, and every day you go to bed and you're like, okay, tomorrow's gonna be it. Tomorrow's the day. I'm gonna take my temperature. I am gonna wake up and be a completely different person. And it's just not real. And you wake up and you're like, I'm still me. And you forget to do it, or you get up and pee, and then you're like, oh gosh, I was supposed to do this. All right, I'll do it tomorrow. But tomorrow never seems to come, and you never seem to loop together more than a couple days of temperature information. You can use a wearable. And there are several wearable thermometers on the market. I would say my favorite is Temp Drop, so there's a plug for you, Temp Drop, just because it's the most versatile and most everybody can use it. It's very simple. So you wear it, you go to bed, it measures your temperature for you, and you can sync it to your smartphone every now and again, and then you can see when ovulation occurred. So that's my solution for if you've got more than $12 to throw at this. I think right now Temp Drop will run you about $150 here in the US. So it's not nearly, it's like 10 times more expensive than the other solution. However, it's pretty fail safe. You just have to put it on.
Yeah, I use the Whoop watch when I remember to charge it and wear it, but it lasts like several days between charges, so I will normally get all my sleep data and my basal body temperature when I wake up, and there's this new like menstrual cycle tracking feature on it as well now, which is pretty cool. But there are definitely a bunch of wearables.
On the Whoop? Is it called Whoop?
It
there
is.
It is.
That's
when you ovulate.
That's what it says whenever you put it on.
when you ovulate, it says Whoop. There it is, because there's your egg.
The egg is. It should.
Yeah, Whoop. Also, send us each a brace. I'm actually thinking of buying a Whoop. Truly. I don't have an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or any kind of thing. And I feel like I need one.
I do like the Whoop. I do like it. There's a lot of information on it. They give you like monthly health workups, which can either scare you or empower you. There's a lot of information on it, but I guess it depends on what you're looking for. So coming back to our fertility, since ovulation is, we want to ovulate in order to get pregnant. That seems to be a really important feature of our entire cycle.
I mean, whether or not you want to ovulate to get pregnant, you must.
Yes.
There's no other way. There's no other way.
Are there any specific foods that you recommend to support ovulation or to support progesterone? Like if you had to pick like 5 foods.
Your progesterone status is a vital sign aligned with your overall body health, all right? So if you've got stuff going on in your life, it's not like, hey, eat 2 plums and it's going to like be better. So
you mean it's not that easy?
It's not that easy. And it's not, I know, and it's not, fertility nutrition is not sensational. It's not sexy. It's kind of boring. It's like, oh, I should be eating protein and vegetables. Like, I haven't heard that 100 times everywhere I go. That's pretty much what it comes down to. So step 1 nutritionally and making quality progesterone and getting ready for that healthy ovulation, sisters, is eating enough. Eating enough. That is really key. Undereating is a stress, and your body actually makes stress hormones and progesterone from the same substrate called pregnenolone. So if you are stressed, undereating, overtraining, your body will make stress hormones and not progesterone. So step 1 is making sure, just plain and simple, that you're eating enough. And eating at consistent intervals, okay? I'm looking at you, nighttime binge eaters. I'm looking at you, sisters, who are like, again, I'm going to wake up a different person. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to take my basal body temperature and then I'm going to have a shake and then coffee, and then you get to work and you maybe have like a Baby Bell cheese and you're doing your life and things are so busy, and then you hit your Orange Theory class on the way home and you had like maybe a protein bar before you do that. You get home and you're freaking starving. So you're snacking while you're making dinner, you eat dinner, and then an hour or 2 later, you are raiding that pantry, raiding that fridge. You're having like chips and peanut butter cups and ice cream and jerky and granola bars, and you're just sort of snacking until bedtime. So that person, while she may be eating enough calories, really placed herself in a stressful starvation state for a good portion of the day. So making sure you're eating enough and eating frequently enough, that is really, really, really key. And just it doesn't matter what you're eating. If you're not doing those things, you're going to struggle to make quality progesterone.
Accidentally intermittent fasting every day.
Gina will text me and be like, I haven't eaten anything today except for a slice of cheese. And I'm like, well, it's 4 p.m. Maybe we should get some food.
We all do it. We all do it. Everybody does this.
Yeah. So something that my provider is doing a lot of lab work for me since I've been postpartum to kind of check on my levels. And he's like really big on lab work just in general for like overall health, which is really awesome. But one of the things that was low for me was my B12, which he said could also be suppressing my appetite. Which is probably why I eat like a bird and then all of a sudden binge eat. So my overall health, my Whoop Watch has not been notifying me of this error on my part, unfortunately.
But do we need an app to tell us we need to eat? That pattern of eating is not healthy or sustainable. And so it's going to be important for you to make. I mean, I know you're not trying to conceive at this time, but yeah, that's so listeners, that's really important. And then beyond that, once we're eating enough and once we're eating at regular intervals, Now we can start talking about the content of those meals and snacks. What is it that you're actually eating? And starting with a lot of protein-rich food, especially animal protein. People always get all bajiggity about this, but animal protein, I'm talking about your beef, chicken, turkey, pork, eggs, dairy like cheese and yogurt and cream. This is where you're going to find your fat-soluble vitamins. This is where you're going to find that preformed vitamin A, which is what progesterone is made out of. That's what makes that corpus luteum, that yellow body, that's what makes it yellow, is that vitamin A. So we want to get lots of fat-soluble vitamins from quality animal products. That's the best source of protein, the most nutritious source of protein when it comes to your fertility. Doesn't have to only be that. You are more than welcome to eat nuts and seeds and beans and grains. These also have protein. These also have nutrients. I'm not saying that they're not healthy for you and you shouldn't be eating them. I am simply saying that basing your meals off of where am I going to get some quality animal protein, let me start my meal with that. Then adding on your beans, your grains, your vegetables, your fruits. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck and the most bang per calorie nutrition-wise. So that's a good place to start. Egg yolk, super high in vitamin A, great for you. Beef, really high in vitamin A and choline, great for you. That, and then your brightly colored fruits and veggies. So your red peppers, beets, cherries, berries of all kinds, citrus, dark leafy greens, even foods that maybe aren't as bright in a color as you might think, like your white foods. White is still a bright color, you all, okay? If you're trying to make a color brighter, like you're painting, what are you going to add? White. All right. People always are like, oh, well, and cauliflower isn't nutritious because it's white. BS. It's nutritious. So cauliflower, onions, mushrooms, these are all great foods to fuel your body to make that healthy progesterone and support your cycle.
So when someone is planning a pregnancy, when should they start thinking about nutrition?
Sort of depends on where you're at. So if we're just saying like healthy, not been taking any medications, young, virile, I like to say give yourself a good 3-month lead time. It takes about 3 months to mature an egg. Even though you release a mature egg once per cycle, that egg began its journey to becoming a mature egg 3 months ago. So it takes 3 months. So give yourself about 3 months. So think of it as like a premester. So before your first trimester, you have one trimester even before that, so the 0 trimester or whatever, where you're getting your body ready for pregnancy. Now, if you have been on medications, like let's say you were using a NuvaRing or a Mirena, you were taking birth control pills, and you're going to get an IUD removed or you're going to come off of those hormones before trying to conceive, I recommend giving your body at least 6 months to prepare for pregnancy, if you can. You don't have to do that. You know, you can begin eating for pregnancy now and still be having regular sex and not using a condom or whatever, and that's fine. But if you don't get pregnant immediately, don't be so surprised. It can take a little while for your organs and hormones to come back online after taking hormones like that, especially if you were using them for purposes other than trying not to get pregnant. A lot of women start taking birth control pills or using the NuvaRing or getting a patch or a shot or an implant because they have periods from hell, because they aren't cycling regularly and their period will come with a vengeance and last a month, and then they won't see it again for another 6 months because they're having acne, because they're having hair growth, because they're having all kinds of other issues. If that's the reason or part of the reason why you started taking these hormonal birth controls, give yourself some good time to get healthy and figure out some of these issues before you try to have a baby. And be realistic with your timeline. I mean, recognize the fact that those problems are signs that your body wasn't healthy. So if you want to have a baby sometime soon, you maybe need to come off of these birth control devices or medications and invest in your cycle health for a little while before it's even realistic to expect to get pregnant. Because I see so many women that just brokenhearted. They thought because of our Western sex education that they were just going to, look at a naked penis, immediately be pregnant. And it just is not how it happens when you're having painful periods, terrible acne, intense heavy bleeding, all of these symptoms that maybe had you reaching for hormonal birth control in the first place.
So what about if somebody is moving on to a subsequent pregnancy? So they've already had a baby, maybe they're breastfeeding, or maybe they've stopped breastfeeding. Like, what are some considerations when preparing for a subsequent pregnancy with their fertility?
I'm pretty risk averse. So the first consideration that I like for people to look at is let's look at the data. The number one cause of disability is premature birth, all right? So what are the factors that can contribute to premature birth? Spacing of pregnancies. So if you have had less than a year between pregnancies, not between your kids' birthdays, between pregnancies, okay, which means let's say your baby was born January 1st, you don't get pregnant again till January 1st of the following year. Having a year between pregnancies is statistically associated with much lower rates of premature birth and then the disability and complications that can happen from that. So the first thing to look at is, am I giving my body a reasonable amount of time to recover? This can be really a hard pill to swallow for my 35 and older crowd that are like 40's knocking on my door. I got to have a baby. I got to have it now. I got to have another baby. This baby needs a sibling. And they want to just press the gas and pop out babies as fast as possible. And while many women have had babies close together and their babies are healthy and it was beautiful and there was no issues, statistically, I don't think I would be a very credible provider of medical care if I didn't shoot you straight and say, you're really rolling the dice in doing that. And some people have done it and it has been beautiful, and praise to them, hooray, what a miracle. But when we're talking about deliberately trying to become pregnant, I recommend waiting at least a year between pregnancies, with 18 months being pretty much where your risk bottoms out. So your risk every month after postpartum, your risk of prematurity and birth complications drops. So 2 months postpartum, 3, 4, 5, each month it's dropping, with a pretty sharp cutoff about 1 year, then a gradual decline until you hit about 18 months. In 18 months postpartum, sort of doesn't matter if you're 18 months postpartum or 5 years postpartum, the risk pretty much is about the same. So spacing of pregnancies would be number one. Number two, what is your family, your child, your life going to be able to support? Are you still only sleeping like 2 hours at a time because your baby's waking up to nurse all night long? Are you drowning underneath laundry and cooking and dishes and tasks and diapers? Well then, sister, I know you want to grow your family, and I know that, maybe you and your brother who you're closest with was, you're only 18 months apart or something like that, and you really, really want that for your kids. But if your life is just not in a place where you can do this, it's okay to wait a little longer, to wait till your baby's a little older, maybe doesn't need you so much, because you have an obligation to this baby already. The baby that already exists needs you more than the baby that might come down the road. So I also recommend getting a realistic view of your life. What can you reasonably do that isn't going to send you into the loony bin? Because if you have another baby and are just crippled by depression and anxiety and insomnia, that is just sad and unnecessary a lot of times. If you could have just given yourself a little more time to heal, to rebuild your community, to get some support around you, to where you can have another baby and it would be a joyful addition to your family instead of course, joy and love, but also so much more stress, I recommend that as well. But again, we're talking about just people that are planning and they're spacing pregnancies. I got pregnant I worked so hard and had so many fertility problems to get pregnant with my first. And my second baby was a total surprise. And my first baby was not sleeping through the night. She was still nursing all the time. She was only 1. She just turned 1. And much to my shock, I was pregnant with number 2. And so sometimes you just have to say, okay, God, here I go on this journey. And it's a done deal. This baby's coming, and I need your grace and your help through this season. And, please help, because this is happening. But when we're talking about just deliberately planning, those are 2 really good things to consider. And I'm just saying, consider them. Go into it with your eyes open. If you're like, yeah, you know what? I know that this is a risk, but I want to take that risk. It's your life, sister. You can decide what risk is worth taking. So those are 2 things to consider on the front end. Next is if you're trying to conceive and you already have a baby. I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm probably talking to both y'all, you need to live off more than toddler scraps, okay? You can't just have coffee and your kids' leftovers for every meal and count that as, okay, I'm doing it. You need more than...
I only have coffee. I can't eat their leftovers because I eat it all. Or they licked and drooled over it all.
I know. I heard something recently from the Raising Intuitive Eaters account that really helped me. She was like, the wasted food from kids like slobbering and touching and spitting or trying and not liking or whatever. Think of that as like the paper and markers that get quote unquote wasted while they're learning to draw and write. This is them learning. They're learning about textures and flavors. They're learning about their own fullness and hunger. It could be so grating to be like, oh, they wasted this. Why did I give you a bite of this scallop or whatever? Like, this is expensive and fancy and special, and you didn't care and you spat it out. But like looking at it from the lens of, okay, well, they're learning. So this is like, imagine, would I be mad at them for wasting a piece of paper by trying to write their name? I would not. So let's just maybe look at this the same way.
I like that.
But bottom line, you need to live off more than toddler scraps and coffee. So you need to be eating regular meals and snacks. You need to be prioritizing your own nutrition. You need to be planning food, shopping for food, buying food that you like to eat, that fills your belly and gives you the nutrients you need. And that's also why when maybe you're in the throes of it postpartum and you're like, I can't imagine doing that for myself. Maybe another pregnancy right now is not going to be helpful to you. Maybe wait a little bit till you can get your footing a little more.
So thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us and with our listeners. How can our listeners learn more from you?
I actually co-host a podcast with my best friend, Caitlin. She is a PCOS fertility specialist, and I am the progesterone specialist. So together we host a podcast where we go into all of this and more. We have specialists on, everything from body work, surgery, different nutritional things. We've got it all. And then I also have my Instagram page, TTC Nutritionist, or ttcnutritionist.com is my website. So if you're looking for like a snack, right? You just want a couple little bites of information. You're just kind of dipping your toe in the jacuzzi when it comes to fertility nutrition. Head on over to my Instagram. That's where I'm giving like little bite-sized tastes of nutrition information. But if you're looking for a full meal, that's where you go to the podcast. That's where we are diving deeper. We're giving nuance. We have experts. We have data. It's not just me making a graphic of like 3 different ways to eat oranges to support fertility. Like it's much more involved. So those are the 2 main ways. If you like what you hear, that's how you get more.
Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast with us.
Of course.
Do you have any last advice for our followers or our listeners?
I would say my last advice for you is please start tracking your cycle. It is so important, and it will not only tell you about your own body and health, but it will help you get medical help if you need it. Because if you just go traipsing into your doctor's office and say, I want to have a baby, they'll be like, okay, stop taking birth control pills and buy a prenatal vitamin. Call me when you're pregnant or come back when you're not and I'll give you some Clomid. And that's all they've got, right? That's it. They don't have much more for you than that. But if you have been tracking your cycle and you know, I'm actually not having my period very frequently, I'm bleeding between periods. I don't even think I'm ovulating. Wow, I'm having so much pain in this one spot during this one time of my cycle. That's when you can go into your doctor and you can say, I've got this stuff going on, and they can actually look into it and help you versus you waiting until you've been trying to get pregnant for a year, then going in and finding out, oh my God, I could have been on antibiotics 12 months ago and solved this problem, and I didn't even know what was going on because I wasn't paying attention. It can also save a pregnancy. And I really want to raise awareness on this because when you go into a doctor and they calculate your weeks of gestation, they look at when was your last period, okay? They don't ask when did you ovulate, they ask when was your last period. And if you are not having regular ovulation, there could be a lot more time between your last period and your ovulation than your doctor realizes. And I have had patients of mine who didn't ovulate till 3-4 weeks after their period go in. The doctor says, when was your last period? She says 8 weeks ago. So she should realistically be about 6 weeks along. They go in there and they say, I'm so sorry. I'm not seeing much. I see a little gestational sac. I'm not seeing a heartbeat. I'm so sorry. It looks like your pregnancy stopped at about 4 weeks. Little did the doctor know, she actually is only 4 weeks pregnant because she didn't ovulate till much later in her cycle. And they sent her home with mifeprednisone or whatever that medication is to help her have a miscarriage. She didn't want to take it because she just wasn't sure, and she just had a feeling that her baby was still alive. Lo and behold, because she tracked her cycle, because she knew she was only 4 weeks pregnant where the doctor calculated 8 weeks pregnant from her last period, she went on to have a healthy pregnancy and healthy baby. If she would have taken that medicine, it would have ended her pregnancy and her baby's life right then. So that is why, part of why, I recommend you really, really track your cycle. And unfortunately, she's not the only one who has had that happen. I have had many people who ovulate later in their cycles, but they wouldn't know that if they weren't paying attention. They would just think, okay, my last period was 8 weeks ago, which means I should be about 6 weeks pregnant. And they go in and there's only measuring at, 3-4 weeks. It would be a huge heartbreak. But you go in saying, I'm about 3 to 4 weeks pregnant. They take a look. Yeah, looks like you're about 3 to 4 weeks pregnant. Hot damn, baby on board. A much different experience. So I recommend, if there's one thing I could send you home with, you can head on over to my Instagram or to my website and you can take my Ovulation Unlocked course. It takes about 90 minutes. You will become an expert at tracking your own cycle, and that will never happen to you. So that's my piece of advice to send you home with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Sophia. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm excited to meet you in about a week.
Yeah, 1 week from today. All right.
All right. Thanks for being here with us.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode. If you want more support throughout your pregnancy, join our prenatal fitness programs and childbirth education course. If you want more support after birth, join our postpartum fitness programs and education courses. If you're a professional, we offer birth worker and fitness trainer courses so you can learn from us and earn CEUs. Explore all of our courses on our website at MamasteFit.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow our podcast to be notified when we release new episodes, leave a review, and share with all of your friends and family. We release new episodes every Wednesday and new birth stories every Friday. If you want to learn more from us, you can find us on Instagram at MamasteFit.com. This podcast is sponsored by Needed, a nutrition company focused on optimal nourishment for your perinatal journey. Use code MamastePod for 20% off your first Needed order.